Okay, Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Machin Leira Online Smicha. Dover Be'itoy Matoiv, it's best to always be focused and live with the times and know which halachas you got to brush up. So now that it's coming summer season and people hang out a lot outside, Shabbos and the summer has a lot of interesting halachas. And we have to be prepared. Chazal tell us that we learn Pirkei Avos during this period of time, so we should be prepared in the midas. And now spending time outside or using different types of food on Shabbos in the summer is different than during the winter. So let's touch upon a couple of things. Maybe today we'll cover one, and some other time we'll even cover making of ice cream, scooping out ice cream. Ice cream is a favorite. Isis is a favorite on Shabbos. What issues are there with making the ice cream, scooping the ice cream, freezing the ice cream, melting the ice cream? Every one of those questions I just stated is at least a discussion. It's not something that you could just overlook. So the summer months is a relaxing time. It's a warm time. People hang out outside, and even the children. It's always good to remember that the Alter Rebbe in Siman Shin Ches Sif Pei Gimel quotes, Asur lischek b'kader b'Shabbos v'yantiv. You're not allowed to play ball on Shabbos v'yantiv because you're not allowed to carry it. It might be muktzah. But then he goes on to say, v'yesh matirim l'tal taloi lischek b'ila, those that allow you to play with a ball. V'nagu mikedem lahakel, and already became accepted to be allow this to happen, and nobody stops them. Because there are opinions that don't consider a ball a dvar muktzah. Now I'm using this as a starting point because the reason why playing ball might be a shaila is because of muktzah. Okay, so we somehow dodged that bullet. Because yesh lema mishi yismeichu. But obviously, if you're dedicating Shabbos properly, the way Halacha wants you to keep Shabbos, of course, how Chassidus wants you to keep Shabbos, it's not a time of playing ball. It's Shulchan Aruch says what you have to do in Shabbos, and I want to share with you what the Shari Tshuva brings from the Arizal, that after Shabbos, then the Sham Yisera comes up. The Sham Yisera, which you got in Shabbos, comes up back to Shemayim. The first question they ask him is Machi Dashta Yom B'Torah. What did you learn extra? But not how many home runs have you hit? So Shabbos is a whole different day, spiritually and even physically. Okay, so let's talk about a shaila that somebody just asked me last week. So that's why, and we're learning these halachas now. I want to discuss it. Somebody asked me. I was in upstate New York. Somebody asked me, am I allowed to blow bubbles, make bubbles for the children on Shabbos? So what comes to mind when you think about making bubbles on Shabbos? You think about two possible shilas. One shaila is, where was the bubble before you started blowing the soap? It wasn't around. So you created something. We're learning the laws of Shchita. And in the laws of Shchita is their whole discussion of melting ice, crushing ice. What do you mean? The water was here, but it was in a different form, in an ice form. Yet to crush ice with your hands, to do that malacha is doime lebeirei mayim alalu. It's like that's one of the reasons you're not allowed to do it. It looks like you're creating something. So these bubbles, even though obviously it's concealed in potential in the soap, but nevertheless, you created something new. So the question is that will that be an issue? Creating something new, and another question might come up, and that is, how about the fact that you're blowing it out in the wind? Now, I want to read Siman Shin Yotes in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Sif Chav Tes. Siman Shin Yotes Sif Chav Tes. The Alter Rebbe says, Haroikek baruach, somebody who spits out in the wind. Varuach mefazer haroik, and the wind spreads out the spit. chayiv mishum zoira. He is chayiv because he's doing a similar act as winnowing, where that's what they would do. The farmers would do to throw up the kernels, so it separate the husk. It's just that's how you separate. It's the reason why this halacha is in Siman Shin Yutes. That's another form of separating. Zoira is very close to boirer. It's on its own a malacha. So even to spit into the wind, because the wind is causing the spit to split and to separate, it's chayiv mishum zoira. Says the Alter Rebbe, and those that hold that a malacha she'ein tzricha legufa pater, those who hold that if I'm doing something and I don't need the outcome of the malacha, every malacha that we prohibit is because you did an act that you want the final product. Over here, when you're spitting out in the wind, you don't want the final product. It's nowhere near what zoira was with the wheat, with the kernels. Over there, you want something to happen. Over there, you're spitting in the air. So in that case, if you hold like that opinion, af kam putter, that would also be putter. Avo asur midivrei seifrim afila eina miskaven lekach. But with the Rabbanon, he would still be asur. Ela shehu psikreisha v'lo yamus. So the Alter Rebbe basically is not too happy with blowing out in the wind, spitting out in the wind. Now there's actually another svara why blowing bubbles would be a step further away from Zohar. Not only because malacha she'ein tzricha legufa, you could say won't apply by bubbles, because when you spit, you actually don't want this. You just want to get rid of the spit. You're not interested in the splitting of what the wind is doing to it. By the bubbles, you actually want the bubbles. You're blowing the soap. You actually want the bubbles, so it is tzricha legufa. But there's another twist that some achrayim talk about, and they say, really zoira is where you're separating something bad from something good. That's why this halacha is actually mentioned in continuation with boirer. So there is something that you want to keep, and something if the wind is separating. By a bubble, you're not separating anything. It's just changing the form. So is it exactly Zoira or not? Is this opinion the final opinion or not? Because it's based on what the Ramah quotes. A lot of people, the Mishnah Berurah has issues with it. But the point, when you look at the Alter Rebbe says spitting where you don't want this spit, and you definitely don't need it to split in the wind. The Alter Rebbe says it's either Isser D'Oraisa or Isser D'Rabbanan. Very scary. Now let's talk about Noilad. The fact that you're changing the form of the soap to the liquid bubbles, from liquid to bubbles. We know that there are two types of things. In Siman Shin Ches, the Alter Rebbe says the Noilad is something which is more chamor in Yom Tif than in Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe says in Siman Shin Ches, Seif Chav Gimel, Hanoilad Mutar b'Shabbos. Things that happened were created on its own. On Shabbos, it's allowed. For example, a guy that made a kli cheres, a guy that put together something new on Shabbos. You never instructed him. He put something together. It was created on Shabbos. Then mutar l'taltala. You are allowed to carry it because noilad is not a problem on Shabbos. Aval Yom Tiv, over here, Yom Tiv is worse. Yom Tiv is noilad is usher. This is one of the few things that Yom Tiv is stricter than Shabbos. So that is an item that's happening by itself. A guy made it, something that happened by itself. The ice water that I was speaking about before, it didn't happen by itself. The ice water, we were discussing where a person crushed it with his hand. That's moiled, that's biting mayim alalu. That's a higher form. So back to the bubbles, to make bubbles. So the Shmira Shabbos Kol Chasam, Perek Tazayin, Islam and Aleph, he says, don't worry about stopping kids who are making bubbles, but on Shabbos. But lechatchila, an adult shouldn't do it, and definitely you shouldn't. You also should not instruct the kids to do it. Why? So he brings in the Hara, he heard from Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that the difference over here is that the bubbles have no permanence. The bubbles are just bubble in the air, and you didn't do something permanent. Has no kiyum. So since this whole discussion might be a derabanan, now why is it only the rabbanon? The noilat part, the B'yirei Mayim Alolu part, he doesn't even speak about the zoyda. But it looks like he's ignoring that issue. Therefore, if a kid is doing it, you don't have to stop him. You don't have to stop him, but don't tell him to do it, and an adult should not do it. Now, the bubble issue comes up not only by a child, comes up by an adult. How? I'm not talking about an adult who wants to blow bubbles. That guy needs a checkup. I'm talking about a guy, a man or a woman who's washing the dishes with kosher Shabbos liquid soap. When you wash with soap, soap creates bubbles. So is that allowed? So that too, in Shmira Shabbos Kilchasa over here, it's Perek Yud Beis, Ois Ches, he says, you're allowed to wash the dishes with the kosher soap, even though bubbles might happen, and there is Ein Bekach Mishum Isser Noilid Oy Moilid. Don't be worried, don't be concerned that there's a problem of Noilid and Moilid, because you're not doing it. He brings from the Ketzer Shulchan, he brings from others. Moshe, he questions the Psak. Moshe says, so when you're washing the dishes, the bubbles are completely happening without your instruction. I mean, meaning it's not what you need or what you want. So you're allowed to, that type of bubbles is not a problem. Another bubble situation which is discussed is the Ben Ish Chai in his Sefer Rav Pa'alim, Siman Siman Kuf Yud Ches, discusses if you're allowed to make seltzer on Shabbos. That's also injecting something into the seltzer, some carbon into the seltzer, and it starts bubbling. So he permits it. He says because when you're injecting, what you are injecting is not the bubble. It's different than when you blow the bubble, you're making the bubble. Here you're injecting something, and it'll take a minute later, and the offshoot of what you did creates the bubble effect in the seltzer. So that's, even though I won over there, I definitely won it, because if not, I would just drink a lame cold glass of water. But because, and what's the big deal of making the bubbles? I mean, the bubbles have no kiyum, so let's throw all these svaras together, and the Ben Ish Chai allowed to make seltzer on Shabbos. Now, a very important thing is, once we're speaking about the zoyra spitting in the air, I would like to finish off that there's a discussion about spray. How about spraying something on Shabbos? And this, when we're talking about spray, you have to split it up into many categories. Spraying something which has a scent, a smell. Now, something that has a smell, you have to be careful about moiled reach, where it applies and where it doesn't apply. Let's talk about just any spray. A spray that spreads out. Now we said that especially the Alter Rebbe is worried about spitting in the air, that it spreads it out, and that's zoyra. How about spray with a can? So there are those that say that from the Yerushalmi, the Minchas Yitzchak, Dayan Weiss says that from the Yerushalmi it's mashma that the Isser Zoyra is only if the wind does the act. If, however, if a person is doing the act of spraying, and the splitting will happen even without the wind, even if the wind helps out, there is no Isser Zoyra af midrabanan. So based on that, Dayan Weiss in the Shalos Teshuvas Minchas Yitzchak Chelik Vav Siman Chav Vav says that you're allowed to spray something that splits, even though it's splitting, but it's, the wind is not doing it. However, there are those that challenged it, and Moshe Stern and Shalos Teshuvas Bar Moshe Chelik Vav Siman and Aleph says that Zoyra that you created, even though it's not being done by the wind, is still an Issa D'Rabbanan. So there are some people that do not like using spray on Shabbos.